Ladies and gentlemen, we all have something inside us that wants to grow. An idea, a dream, a vision. But the problem is, we've been taught to wait for the perfect time, to wait until we're ready, to wait until the path is clear, the risk is gone, and someone gives us permission. But life doesn't reward those who wait. Life rewards those who take a chance. You have to take a chance, not because it guarantees success, but because it guarantees possibility. When I started learning about leadership, it wasn't because I had all the answers. It was because I was confused. I had worked with people who inspired me, and I had worked with people who drained me. And I kept asking the question, why do some leaders bring out the best in us and others bring out the worst? I didn't know where the question would take me, but I took a chance on finding out, and that's the point. Every great journey starts with a leap of faith. It's not about knowing, it's about believing. Believing that what you're doing matters even if you don't know where it ends. We all talk about wanting more from life. More meaning, more impact, more fulfillment. But none of those things come without risk. They don't come in a box. They don't arrive in the mail. They are created, and creation always involves uncertainty. The Wright brothers didn't know how to fly a plane when they started. Elon Musk didn't know how to land a rocket when he launched SpaceX, and Martin Luther King Jr. didn't know how the civil rights movement would unfold when he started marching, but they all had one thing in common: they took a chance. Most of us are afraid of failure, but we misunderstand what failure really is. Failure isn't falling, it's refusing to jump. It's looking at the opportunity in front of you and saying, "I'll wait." You don't learn from staying still. You learn from trying, you learn from falling, and eventually, you learn to fly. Taking a chance is not about being reckless. It's about being courageous. It's about saying, I may not have it all figured out, but I care enough to try. That's leadership. That's growth. That's how we build something that lasts. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need all the answers. You just need to take the next step, because that's where transformation begins. Not in certainty, but in courage. So whether it's starting a business, having a tough conversation, changing careers, or following a dream that's been buried inside you for years, take the chance, because regret is not what comes from failing. Regret is what comes from never trying at all. And the world doesn't need more perfect people. The world needs more people who are willing to take a chance. Would you like this expanded into a multi-part breakdown like your previous speeches? Or is this the full version you were looking for? The truth is, most people spend their lives waiting. They wait for the perfect moment. They wait until they feel ready. They wait for a sign that it's time to move, to speak, to act. But that moment, if it comes at all, rarely looks the way we expect. What we don't realize is that waiting can often become a form of fear disguised as wisdom. We say we're being patient, that we're preparing, that we're just not ready yet. But deep down, we're afraid. Afraid of the unknown, afraid of judgment, afraid of what happens if we try and it doesn't work. But here's the truth: life doesn't reward hesitation. It rewards movement. The world doesn't open up for those who wait. It opens up for those who dare. Every meaningful achievement in human history began with someone who took a chance. They didn't have all the information. They didn't have certainty, but they moved forward anyway. They chose to believe in a possibility, even if they couldn't see the whole path. And that choice to step into the unknown is what separates those who live fully from those who merely exist. When you wait for guarantees, you trade your power for comfort, but when you take a chance, you reclaim your agency. You start leading your life instead of following it. What's stopping most of us is not ability, it's belief. We convince ourselves that we're not qualified enough, smart enough, talented enough. But none of those things are required to take a chance. All that's needed is the willingness to be uncomfortable, because that's what growth feels like: uncertainty, vulnerability, risk. And that's why most people avoid it. But comfort is not where purpose is found. Purpose lives on the other side of risk. It's only when you do something that scares you that you discover what you're truly made of. The first step is always the hardest, but it's also the most important. Once you take that first step, once you take the chance, you begin a process of becoming, and yes, there will be setbacks, there will be mistakes, but they are part of the journey. In fact, they are essential to the journey. Because the only way to learn is to try, the only way to grow is to stretch, and the only way to lead is to leap. You don't have to take every chance, but you have to take a chance on something, on yourself, on your dream, on the possibility that there is more to your life than the routine you've settled into. Because the longer you wait, the quieter that voice inside you becomes, and one day, if you wait too long, you may not hear it at all. Don't let that happen. Don't silence your own potential. Take the chance. You'll never be ready, but you don't need to be. You just need to be brave. When I began my work on leadership, I didn't have a grand vision. I wasn't trying to write books or give speeches. I was simply trying to understand why some people inspired me and others didn't. That curiosity led me into the unknown. I didn't know where it would lead. I didn't know if it would succeed, but I took a chance, on an idea, on a question, on a possibility. That's how every meaningful journey starts, not with certainty, but with curiosity, not with answers, but with a deep desire to seek the truth. We're often taught that we need a clear destination before we begin, but the reality is you discover the destination along the way. Most people don't begin because they want to be right. They want to make sure they're going in the right direction. But the world doesn't work like a GPS. There is no voice that tells you, turn left in 100 feet and you'll find your purpose. Instead, you get vague nudges, gut feelings, ideas that won't leave you alone. Those are not accidents, they are invitations, and when you respond to them, not with a perfect plan, but with action, you unlock doors you didn't even know existed. The pursuit of something meaningful always begins with uncertainty. But that uncertainty is not something to fear. It's something to follow, because uncertainty means you're venturing beyond what's familiar. It means you're reaching for something more than what you've already known. That's where growth begins. That's where innovation begins. That's where transformation happens. We have this illusion that great leaders and successful people had everything figured out from day one. But they didn't. They made decisions based on what they believed in, not what they knew for sure. Steve Jobs didn't know the iPhone would change the world. He believed it could. Oprah didn't know starting her own network would work. She believed it was worth the risk. The Wright brothers didn't know flight was possible. They believed it was worth trying. What makes someone a leader is not that they know everything. It's that they believe in something enough to take a chance. You don't need to have everything figured out. In fact, waiting until you do is often just another excuse to avoid the discomfort of beginning. What you need is to act on your belief, and that belief doesn't have to be massive. It can be as small as a question, what if? What if things could be different? What if I could start something new? What if I followed this idea, this calling, this instinct? When you act on that question, when you allow curiosity to move you, you start building something bigger than yourself. You step into a story that you haven't written yet. And the best part is you don't need to know the ending. You just need to take the next step. Because movement creates clarity, and clarity creates momentum. But it all begins with the willingness to take a chance. We live in a world where people are desperate for fulfillment. They want to wake up and feel like their lives matter, like their work means something, like they are part of something bigger than themselves. And yet, most people feel stuck, trapped in routines, jobs, or situations that drain them rather than inspire them. The truth is, meaning doesn't show up at your front door. It's not something you stumble upon by accident. It's something you create, and creation always involves uncertainty. It requires that we step out of the known and take a chance on something unfamiliar. You cannot find purpose without risk. It's impossible. Because purpose doesn't exist in the realm of comfort, it lives in that space where you are unsure of the outcome, where your actions might fail, where your ego might take a hit. That's what makes it powerful. If it were easy, everyone would do it, but because it's risky, because it costs something, only those who are willing to take a chance ever truly find it, and that's why it's so easy to settle. Comfort feels safe. Predictability feels responsible. But slowly, silently, it starts to eat away at you. You stop dreaming, you stop questioning, you stop growing, you might be surviving, but you're not alive. That's the danger of staying safe for too long. You begin to convince yourself that this is all life has to offer. And eventually, you stop looking for more. But you are meant for more. You feel it. There's something inside you that wants to contribute, that wants to build, that wants to make an impact. And the only way to honor that calling is to move. Even if you're scared, especially if you're scared, because fear is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're getting close to something meaningful. When we look at people who are doing incredible things, we often assume they were born with some special gift that we lack. But the truth is, most of them were just willing to risk more than we were. They said yes to opportunities they didn't feel ready for. They pursued ideas others laughed at. They made decisions based on belief instead of fear. That's the real difference. It's not about talent. It's about willingness. If you want to feel alive, if you want to wake up with a sense of purpose, if you want to do work that fills you instead of drains you, you have to take a chance. You have to risk rejection. You have to risk failure. You have to risk looking foolish, because only when you put yourself on the line do you discover who you really are. And that discovery, that sense of becoming, is the most fulfilling thing you'll ever experience. But it won't happen by accident. It will only happen when you choose to take the risk, when you choose to take the chance. One of the greatest obstacles to taking a chance is our fear of failure. We've been conditioned to believe that failing is something to be avoided at all costs. From an early age, we're taught to play it safe, get the right answers, avoid mistakes. But in the real world, the people who move forward are not the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who embrace it. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's a requirement for success. It's how we learn. It's how we adapt. It's how we grow. When we see failure as the end of the story, we rob ourselves of the very process that makes achievement possible. Most people aren't held back by their limitations. They're held back by their relationship with failure. They think failing makes them weak or foolish or less than. But what if failure was a sign of strength? What if it meant you were brave enough to try something difficult, to do something most people would never dare to attempt? That's how I define courage, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. And failure is simply feedback. It tells you what didn't work, so you can move one step closer to what will. The irony is, avoiding failure doesn't protect us, it imprisons us. It keeps us stuck in mediocrity. It convinces us that playing small is wise. But no one ever built a legacy from staying comfortable. No one ever changed the world without risking something. Whether you're trying to start a business, write a book, make a difference, or change your life, you will fail at some point. But that failure will not define you. What will define you is how you respond to it. Some of the most influential leaders I've studied and admired have failed, often spectacularly, but they didn't give up. They adjusted, they got back up. They used failure as a teacher, not a judge, and that mindset, that resilience, is what allowed them to eventually succeed. They weren't superhuman. They just refused to let fear have the final word. And neither should you. The question you have to ask yourself is not, what if I fail? The real question is, what will I miss if I never try? Because the pain of failure is temporary, but the pain of regret lasts a lifetime. Regret doesn't come from falling down. It comes from wondering what could have happened if you had taken the chance. That what if haunts people more than any mistake ever could. So shift your thinking. Redefine failure. See it as a necessary, even noble, part of the process. And when you do, you'll stop seeing risk as something to fear and start seeing it as something to embrace. Because the only real failure is not trying. Everything else is just part of the journey, and if you want that journey to mean something, if you want your life to be a story worth telling, you have to take a chance. There's a misconception that in order to take a chance, we have to be reckless. That to leap into something new means abandoning logic, or ignoring reality, or acting on impulse. But that's not what courage looks like. Courage is not about being wild. It's about being intentional. It's about looking at your life, your values, your purpose, and making a decision to move towards something better, even if the outcome is uncertain. Taking a chance isn't about blind risk. It's about meaningful risk. It's about saying, I know this may not work, but I believe it's worth it anyway. The people who change the world aren't gamblers. They're believers. They believe so deeply in what they're doing that they're willing to face discomfort, criticism, and failure to pursue it. That's not recklessness, that's commitment, and commitment is what creates impact. When you take a chance on something that matters, on a mission, on a vision, on a dream that's rooted in purpose, it changes the way you show up. You're no longer driven by fear, you're driven by meaning, but that doesn't mean the path is easy. In fact, taking a chance is often lonely. You may be misunderstood. People might not see what you see. And that's okay. You're not doing it for approval. You're doing it because there's something inside you that refuses to settle. And when you operate from that place, when your actions are fueled by a cause greater than yourself, you'll find the strength to keep going, even when the results don't come quickly. You see, the most powerful motivation isn't external. It doesn't come from rewards or recognition. It comes from alignment. When your actions align with your beliefs, you unlock an energy that can't be manufactured. That's why taking a chance, when done with intention, is not just an act of courage. It's an act of authenticity. You're choosing to live in alignment with who you are and what you believe in. And that is what leadership is all about. Leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about having enough conviction to move forward anyway. To say, I may not know what comes next, but I know who I am. I know what I stand for, and I'm willing to take a chance to build something that reflects that. That kind of leadership inspires others. It creates trust, because people don't follow perfection. They follow honesty, they follow passion, they follow those who are brave enough to go first. So if you feel the pull to try something different, to create, to build, to lead, don't wait until everything makes sense. Instead, look inward, ask yourself what really matters, and then take the chance, not because it's safe, but because it's right. And when you do that, when you move with purpose instead of fear, you stop chasing certainty and start building something meaningful. And that's how you lead a life that truly matters. At some point, we all come to a crossroads, a moment where the path ahead isn't clear, and we're faced with a choice: stay where it feels safe, or move toward the unknown. That moment doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's a conversation, a job offer, a question you can't shake, a restless feeling you've tried to ignore. And in that moment, everything inside you wants to wait. You want more time, more information, more reassurance. But the truth is, the longer you wait, the heavier the decision becomes. Eventually, you're not just deciding whether or not to take a chance. You're deciding whether or not to trust yourself. That's what this all comes down to. Trust, not in a system, not in other people, but in your own instincts, your own values, your own ability to figure it out as you go. And most of us don't lack direction. We lack confidence in our ability to adapt. We're not afraid of failure. We're afraid that if things go wrong, we won't know what to do. But you will. You always have. Look back at your life. Think about the times you faced something unfamiliar. Something scary, something hard. You found a way. You didn't know how at first, but you learned. And if you did it before, you can do it again. Taking a chance is an act of trust. It's trusting that even if you fall, you'll get up. It's trusting that even if it doesn't work out, you'll learn something that brings you closer to who you're meant to be. And it's trusting that your future deserves more than your fear. You were not built to play small. You were not born to be invisible. You were made to grow, to stretch, to try, to fail, to rise, and to contribute. And none of that can happen if you're constantly standing still. Every great story has a turning point. A moment when the main character does something bold, something risky, something they're not sure they're ready for. That moment is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of everything that matters. Your life is the same. It doesn't unfold by accident. It unfolds when you make the choice to participate in your own future, and participation requires risk. So if you're standing at that crossroads, wondering whether to take the chance, here's the truth: you will never feel completely ready. There will always be fear, there will always be doubt, but those feelings aren't reasons to stop. They're reminders that you're on the edge of something important. Don't let fear trick you into thinking it's wisdom. Don't confuse caution with clarity, and don't let the comfort of the known rob you of the life you haven't lived yet. This is your moment, this is your invitation. Take the chance, not because it's easy. Not because it's guaranteed, but because you believe in who you're becoming. And that belief, more than anything else, will lead you to the life you're meant to live.